Imagine holding a heavy silver coin in your hand, feeling the weight of a young nation still defining itself, a nation of muddy roads, candlelit rooms, handwritten laws, and uncertain borders. This is not just a dollar, it is the voice of America between 1825 and 1829, a time when the United States of America was no longer a fragile experiment, yet not fully confident in its future, and this silver dollar carried that tension in every strike, every flaw. Every quiet mark left by the press at the Philadelphia Mint. This was an age before railroads crossed the continent, before telegraphs shrank distance, before the country knew what it would become, and yet the dollar minted in these years spoke clearly of ambition, authority, and survival. These coins were born during the presidency of John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson years, defined by rising democracy, bitter political battles, westward expansion, and a growing divide between old elites and common citizens, and the capped bust dollar of 1825 through 1829 became the physical symbol of that struggle, struck in silver. Drawn from mines worked by human hands, weighed, measured, and pressed with mechanical force into something meant to last longer than any one person who would ever spend it. This was money meant to travel from eastern banks to frontier towns, to trading posts, to ship decks, crossing the Atlantic, each coin passing through countless hands. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, sailors, politicians, and speculators, all trusting that this silver disc represented value, stability, and the promise of a future that was still being written. The design itself tells a story. Liberty is no longer a fragile symbol. She is mature, steady, confident, wearing a cap that echoes classical Republican ideals. Her expression calm yet firm, a statement that the nation has endured revolution, war, and uncertainty, and now claims its place among world powers on the reverse. The eagle is strong, no longer awkward or tentative. It clutches arrows and olive branch. Showing both readiness for conflict and desire for peace, this was a message sent not just to Americans, but to Europe, that the United States of America was here to stay. The years 1825 to 1829 were also marked by economic tension. Silver flowed in and out of the country, foreign coins still circulated alongside American money, and the very idea of a national monetary system was still evolving. Each dollar struck during this period was part of a delicate balance between international trade, domestic confidence, and political ideology. These coins were not made in massive numbers compared to later issues, and many were melted, lost, or worn smooth through hard use. Surviving examples today carry scars that are not damage but history. Worn edge tells of miles traveled. Every softened detail speaks of decades of trust placed in a piece of silver that represented the word America. To people who might never read a newspaper or hear a speech, this dollar was not collected. It was worked, it paid debts, bought land, funded journeys, and sometimes vanished into the ground or the sea. And when you look at a capped bust dollar from 1825 to 1829, you are not looking at a relic, you are looking at a survivor, a witness to a nation. Standing at the edge of transformation, before the age of steam and steel, before civil war, before gold, rushes, and global power, this coin existed when the idea of America was still negotiable, still fragile, still argued over in taverns and halls of government. And that is why this dollar matters, because it is not just silver, it is memory, it is authority, it is risk and belief struck into metal and carried forward through time. And if you listen closely, this coin still speaks, telling the story of a country that dared to turn raw hope into hard money and trust it to the hands of its people. Picture yourself holding a heavy silver dollar in your hand, its surface cool, its edges sharp, its weight unmistakable, and understand that this is not just money, this is the sound of hammers striking silver in a young republic, still unsure if it would survive. This is the United States between 1801 and 1809, a nation barely a generation old, surrounded by powerful empires, divided at home, struggling with debt, war, diplomacy, and identity. And inside that struggle, the first true American dollar of the 19th century was born, the draped bust silver dollar, a coin that did not simply circulate through pockets and banks, but moved through history itself, passing through the hands of merchants, sailors, politicians, soldiers, and dreamers. And every time it changed hands, it carried with it the authority, ambition, and uncertainty of a country learning what it meant to be free. When Thomas Jefferson entered the presidency in 1801, the United States was still an experiment. The Constitution was barely tested, political parties were new and bitterly opposed, and the idea that a federal government could issue a trusted national currency was far from guaranteed. Foreign coins still dominated daily commerce. Spanish dollars were trusted more than American silver, and the United States Mint, founded only a few years earlier in Philadelphia, was struggling with limited technology, inconsistent silver supply, and political pressure. Yet the silver dollar was essential because a nation that wished to stand equal among world powers needed a strong, recognizable unit of account. And so between 1801 and 1803, the draped bust dollar continued production, carrying the portrait of Liberty, designed by Gilbert Stuart and engraved by Robert Scott, a Liberty modeled not as a classical goddess, but as a living, breathing American woman with flowing hair, draped fabric, and a confident gaze. Surrounded by stars representing the states united under one federal banner, the reverse carried a heraldic eagle inspired by the Great Seal of the United States, clutching arrows, and an olive branch, symbolizing war and peace, and above it, a constellation of stars declaring the United States. A presence among nations, these dollars were struck in silver, of substantial purity and weight, and they were meant to inspire trust, not only domestically, but internationally, because American trade depended on acceptance abroad, and each coin had to stand shoulder to shoulder with the famous Spanish milled dollar that ruled global commerce at the time. Yet production numbers were small, mintages were limited by silver availability and political will, and by 1804 something remarkable happened: the mint stopped striking silver dollars entirely. Not because they were unimportant, but because they were too valuable abroad. Merchants and bankers were exporting them in large numbers, melting or trading them overseas, where silver commanded higher value than at home, draining hard money from the domestic economy. And Jefferson, concerned about the loss of silver, quietly ordered a halt to dollar coinage, though the design remained on paper, and the date 1804 would later become legendary. Years later, in the 1830s, when the State Department needed diplomatic gifts for Asian rulers, the mint produced proof dollars dated 1804, even though none were struck for circulation that year, creating what would become the most famous and valuable American coin in history. But from 1804 through 1809, no silver dollars were produced for everyday use, and this absence tells its own story. Because the lack of dollar coinage reveals the fragility of early American finance, the government relied on foreign coins, banknotes, and trust rather than abundant federal silver. And while the draped bust dollar of 1801 to 1803 disappeared from new production, it did not disappear from history. These coins continued to circulate, worn down by use. Carrying scratches from tavern counters, ship decks, and trading tables, they crossed state lines and borders alike, and each mark etched into their surface became a record of American life. At the turn of the century, these dollars paid sailors who would fight the Barbary pirates, merchants who would build Atlantic trade, farmers who would push westward, and politicians who would argue the future of the Republic. And by the time the War of 1812 approached, many of these same coins were still in use, thin-worn and trusted more than paper money. And for collectors today, the draped bust dollar from 1801, 1802, and 1803 represents more than silver content or rarity. It represents the moment when America insisted on defining its own economic identity, when liberty was not yet an abstract symbol, but a promise still being tested, and when every coin struck in Philadelphia echoed with the question of whether this new nation would endure. And the years 1801 through 1809 framed that question perfectly, beginning with confidence, as Jefferson took office, ending with uncertainty, as international tensions rose, and a decade of growth collided with global conflict. And when you look at one of these early dollars today, you are not looking at a relic, you are looking at a survivor of policy, decisions, trade wars, human ambition, and national growing pains. And that is why the first dollar of the early 1800s is not just a coin. It is a witness to the birth of American power and the foundation of everything that followed, and this story does not fit into a short video or a simple explanation because it stretches across politics, art, economics, and human experience, and the deeper you go, the more you realize that this single piece of silver connects directly to the fate of a nation, still learning how to call itself the United States of America. Imagine holding a single American dollar in your hand and realizing that this small piece of metal or paper has witnessed empires, rising markets, crashing wars, raging in dreams. being built, this story begins in 1889 when the United States was still defining its identity as an industrial power, and the dollar was more than money. It was a declaration of strength, confidence, and survival. In 1889, the Morgan silver dollar stood as a giant of American coinage, heavy, bold, and rich in silver. Reflecting a nation fueled by mining railroads and westward expansion, each Morgan dollar carried the face of liberty, modeled after a real American woman, not a mythical goddess, signaling that the United States believed its people were its power. These coins moved through saloons, banks, and dusty frontier towns, while political battles raged in Washington over silver versus gold, making every dollar a silent witness to economic warfare and public trust. As the 19th century closed, the Morgan dollar faded, but the idea of the $1 only grew stronger, entering the early 20th century. America faced global responsibility, and after the devastation of World War I, the peace dollar was born in 1921. Its design was hopeful, almost spiritual, with liberty, crowned by rays of light and an eagle at rest, clutching an olive branch. This was not just currency, it was a promise that the United States sought peace after unimaginable loss. These silver dollars circulated during roaring prosperity and then through the darkness of the Great Depression, when a single dollar could mean food, warmth, or survival. Families hid them, spent them, prayed over them, and the $1 became a symbol of resilience. When silver dollars disappeared from daily life during World War II, the dollar transformed into paper, becoming lighter, faster, and more practical as America mobilized for global conflict. From the 1940s through the 1960s, the $1 bill carried images of stability, with George Washington reminding citizens of foundational values. While the economy boomed, factories roared, and the middle class expanded, yet beneath the surface change was coming. Silver was removed from circulating coins, and trust shifted from metal value to government promise, marking a turning point in monetary history. In 1971, the final break from precious metals reshaped the meaning of the dollar forever, and in the 1970s, the United States attempted to bring back the dollar coin with the Eisenhower dollar, a large, bold tribute to a wartime president, and the Apollo moon landing, connecting American currency to victory, leadership, and space exploration. Though impressive, it was too big for daily use, but it paved the way for the Susan B. Anthony dollar in 1979, honoring a woman who fought for equality and voting rights. This coin represented social progress as much as economic function, yet confusion with the quarter limited its acceptance, showing that public habit can overpower good intentions. By the 1980s and 1990s, the $1 bill remained dominant, quietly circulating through a rapidly changing world, witnessing the Cold War and technology rise and global markets intertwine. By 1997, the dollar stood as a purely faith-based instrument backed by economic power, military strength, and international trust, no longer tied to silver or gold, but to belief in the United States itself. From the heavy silver Morgan dollar of 1889 to the modern dollar of 1997, this single unit of currency tells a story of ambition, struggle, innovation, and endurance. It has paid soldiers, funded inventions, fed families, and crossed oceans, becoming one of the most recognized symbols on Earth. This is not just the history of money, this is the history of America, told through $1 and every scratch fold and exchange carries the echoes of those who lived, dreamed, and survived with it in their hands. Imagine holding a silver dollar struck at the exact moment America was finding its adult voice, a coin born between 1829 and 1837. When the young republic stood at a crossroads of power, money, and identity, this was the era of Andrew Jackson, the era of hard questions about who controlled wealth, who controlled banks, and who controlled the future, and this single dollar carried all of that conflict in its weight, its silver, its design, and its journey through American hands. This was not just money, this was a statement, a challenge, and a warning minted in metal at a time when farmers, merchants, sailors, soldiers, and politicians all fought over what a dollar truly meant. These dollars circulated when the nation was tearing down old elites and building new ones, when the Second Bank of the United States was under attack, and when distrust of paper money ran so deep that silver itself became a symbol of honesty and power. The dollar of 1829 to 1837 connects directly to a nation rejecting centralized banking, embracing hard money, and redefining democracy itself. Every scratch on its surface whispers of taverns and trade routes, riverboats, and dusty roads of wages paid and debts settled, of confidence and collapse. This coin saw the rise of Jacksonian democracy when ordinary citizens demanded a louder voice, and the government responded by reshaping the entire financial system. The designs on these dollars reflect classical ideals, borrowed from ancient republics, because America wanted to see itself as the modern Rome, strong, independent, and destined to last. Liberty on the coin was not decorative, it was political. It represented the belief that freedom was tangible, something you could hold, something you could spend, something you could lose. These silver dollars moved through an economy still finding balance between agriculture and industry, between local trust and national ambition. They were struck at a time when the United States Mint was still perfecting its craft, when each coin carried subtle differences, revealing human hands behind the machinery, and those differences now tell stories collectors, historians, and investors chase today. The years between 1829 and 1837 were marked by expansion, westward pressure on native lands, and explosive population growth, all of which demanded reliable money, and the silver dollar answered that demand. These coins passed through markets where cotton prices ruled fortunes and where international trade demanded silver. Trusted across oceans, this dollar was accepted not because of paper promises but because of the metal itself, weighed, tested, and respected worldwide. And when Jackson dismantled the national bank and moved federal deposits, the ripple effects touched every dollar, including this one, making it a silent witness to one of the most controversial economic decisions in American history. By 1837, as financial panic erupted and banks failed, the meaning of this coin shifted again. It became stability. In chaos, proof of value. When confidence vanished, people hoarded silver, and these dollars disappeared into drawers, chests, and pockets as lifelines of survival. The coin you see today survived melting, survival, loss in circulation that erased millions of its brothers, making each remaining example a rare survivor of a financial battlefield. This is why collectors chase them, not for shine alone, but for the story compressed into 38 millimeters of silver. This is a dollar that lived through ambition, fear, reform, and collapse. It is the sound of a hammer in the mint, the clink of coins on a wooden counter, the silence of a bank run, and the hope of a nation insisting that its money reflect its values. When you study the dollar from 1829 to 1837, you are not just learning about a coin. You are stepping into the heartbeat of early America, where money was power, silver was trust, and a single dollar could carry the weight of a country still deciding who it wanted to be.